Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today I'm very excited to introduce Dan Shulman, who is the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays on Sportsnet. Thanks so much, Dan, for taking the time and coming on. Should I call you Danny? I know people, close friends of yours, call you Danny, so I can call you Danny as well if that works.
I'm good with either. On TV, I'm Dan. Nobody says, "Hey, here's Danny Shulman," but yeah, people do call me Danny a lot in my personal life, and that's totally fine. Whichever's more comfortable for you.
Okay, well, I'll go with Dan because that's your sports net and kind of your professional name. But thanks so much again for doing this and taking the time. I want to ask a little about your career, and I know you have an interesting kind of unconventional start to your career. You were at Western and you were a math major. Maybe just tell us a little bit about how you got started in the industry and maybe a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, so probably like you and everybody else watching your podcast, I was a huge sports fan as a kid, but I never had any thoughts of getting into sports as a career. It just wasn't what you thought about back then. I think it's a lot more common now for people to think that way. But like you said, I was a math kid. I took every math course I could take, and that was what I cared about most in school. And when I went to Western, I was a math major, more specifically statistics and actuarial
Oh,
science.
wow.
Uh, but on the first day of what we called Frosh Week, first year, my parents had always kind of said to my sisters and me, don't just go to school, get involved, like get in a club, get in a program, extracurriculars, whatever. So I wanted to write for the Western Gazette, which was a terrific, and I'm sure still is, a terrific university newspaper. So first day, I leave my dorm at Saugeen and I go over to the main building, and there's like 200 people in line to volunteer for the Western Gazette. So I said, well, I don't think I was 18 years old. I said, I don't think I have the patience to stand in this line. Started walking back towards my dorm and walked past a door that said Radio Western. Didn't know what it was. Knocked on the door. Somebody said, come in. I said, is this the campus radio station? And they said, yeah. And I said, do you do sports? And they said, yep. And I said, do you need volunteers? And they said, yep. And that's how it started. And I did it just for fun. I never, ever, ever at Western thought about this being a career. In fact, I didn't even volunteer or do anything at the radio station my last year, because I was concentrating so much on my studies and actuarial exams you have to write. It wasn't until after I graduated and started working as an actuary where I said, I'm not sure this is for me. And whatever I do, I've got to do it for the next 40 years. So maybe I should rethink this. And then I started sending out tapes from CHRW, which was the campus radio station at Western, and got a part-time weekend job at CKBB in Barrie. And
Wow.
that's kind of how it started. So yeah, it is a little bit unconventional.
And maybe tell us a little bit about how you got to ESPN. And I know you did the 94 World Championships, and then you got the play-by-play gig with the Jays. Just maybe tell us a bit like how that was for you, and how kind of, I think it was very quick for you, how it all kind of came together.
Yeah, it kind of was. So that's a lot of different things. I'm going to try not to ramble on
No,
too much
no.
here, but you asked, so I'll answer. So I worked at Barrie for about a year and a half, and then I got a job at what is now the Fan, but was still then known as CJCL 1430.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't even on 590 yet, and it wasn't all sports yet. Started working there, did some weekends, did some evenings. They started going more and more sports. They needed people. I was there, I was young, and I started getting more opportunities. I went from being a sportscaster to a talk show host, that sort of thing. And by 19, well, there's a few different stories, and you kind of touched on a few of them. So by 1993, I guess it was, I was kind of entrenched as a talk show host there. John Shannon
Yeah.
was in charge of CTV's Olympic coverage at the time. CBC almost always, as you know, has the Olympics. But there were two times back in 92 and 94 where CTV had the Olympics, and they just didn't have the stable of commentators that CBC did. So boy, did that help me. I had done, like at Western, I had done basketball, a lot of basketball, a little football, a little hockey, but like nobody had ever heard those tapes. I don't think I ever sent those tapes to anybody. But by 1993, I guess I was kind of fairly well known as a talk show host in Toronto, but that's about it. But John Shannon said to me, would you like to go to the Olympics in Norway and do hockey? And would you like to do the World Championship of Basketball in August in Toronto? That was Dream Team 2 was in Toronto, the World Championship. I mean, what an opportunity, like unbelievable opportunity. So John Shannon hired me to go to the Olympics. I did hockey. I was the B guy. Don Chevrier did all the Canada games. I did all the non-Canada games. And nobody but like 2 friends and 3 relatives remembers me doing it. And I have no proof that I did it, other than I've got like a plaque from Lillehammer up there, but there's no tapes or anything like that. But an incredible experience. And then, all right, so we'll fast forward a little bit here. So, I come back, I'm working at the Fan, having had these 2 wonderful experiences. And then the Blue Jay job comes up. Jim Hewson, who had been doing the Blue Jays, and as you know, did Hockey Night in Canada so well for so many years, he decided he wanted to step back from baseball and just do hockey. So kind of after the 94 season, like November of 94, I don't even remember if somebody called me or I called somebody, and I applied for the Blue Jay job on TSN at the time. That was the job that Jim was doing, and that was open, and I didn't get it. And I said, okay, fine. I'll go back and, just keep doing my radio thing. And then in February, like 3 months later, I got a phone call saying, are you still interested? So I don't know who auditioned. I don't know what happened, but thankfully the first or second or third choices they had didn't, they couldn't work it out. And in like February of 95, I became the Blue Jay guy. And it did happen fast. So I graduated in 89. I was in Barrie in 90. I got a full-time job at CJCL in Toronto in 91. By 93, I was doing primetime sports, the afternoon drive show that Bob McCown, of course, did for so many years. And then came the Olympics and all that. So I started doing the Blue Jays in 95 with Buck Martinez. Buck at the time was also an ESPN announcer. He would do some ESPN games on nights when he wasn't doing Jays games. And one night I got a phone call in my hotel room in New York. The Blue Jays were playing there on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I had the Jays games on Tuesday and Thursday, but Wednesday was a different network, so I wasn't working. So I get back Tuesday night at like midnight, and the phone light is flashing in my hotel room. This is before cell phones.
Yeah.
And I check my message, and it's the coordinating producer for baseball at ESPN, who I don't know. And he says, we've had somebody cancel on us last second. Can you fly to Kansas City tomorrow and do an ESPN baseball game? And I went, whoa. And I called him. And I guess I had done a little radio for them. I skipped that part of the story because I don't want to ramble on for too long. And they knew me through Buck, and they had heard me do some Jays games. And I filled in on one baseball game. Like I think it was Angels and Royals. And I thought I had a day off Wednesday. Instead, now I'm panicking, trying to prepare for Angels and Royals. No internet.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare when you don't have the internet? You don't till you get to the ballpark at 3:30 in the afternoon the next day. So I flew from New York to Kansas City, did a game that Wednesday night for ESPN, and then went back Thursday to do the Jays game in New York. And Friday, I get a phone call from a man named Dave Miller, who was the coordinating producer for college basketball at ESPN. And he said, hey, I saw you do a baseball game. Do you do any basketball? And I said, well, I have. I did some in university, and I did the World Championships up here that were in August. And he said, send me a tape. Now, back in those days, send me a tape meant send me a tape. So when I got back to Toronto, I guess I had it on VHS or something, and I had it copied, and I couriered it to him. Like, I don't know how anything got done back in those days, to be honest with you. And the next week he called me and he said, how would you like to do college basketball for ESPN? Wow. And that's how it happened. So from, the early to mid 90s, it was kind of a crazy roller coaster. I mean, I was just, 24, 26, 28 years old as all this stuff was happening. When I went to Barrie, all I was hoping to do was get a job in Toronto because I'm from Toronto. Never thought I would do play-by-play, never thought I would be on TV, never thought I would go to the US. So very, very, very grateful. A lot of good lucks, good bounces, good timing, that sort of thing. And that's kind of how it got going.
And with that, obviously you've done a lot of college basketball and a lot of baseball, right? With Sunday Night Baseball, now doing the Jays and obviously doing college basketball for ESPN. For you, what is the difference in maybe how you approach a basketball broadcast compared to a baseball broadcast? Maybe give us a little bit of an insight of, is there any real differences? What are the differences? Just give us a little bit of an insight.
Yeah, the analogy I use is a baseball game is like walking on a treadmill, and every now and again it'll speed up and you'll do a sprint, but mostly you're walking. A
Huh.
basketball broadcast, you're sprinting the whole time. So they are very different. And there have been some years where I'm not doing it anymore, but up until this past year, I did the World Series for ESPN Radio for the last 12 years.
Wow.
So I might finish on November the 2nd or 3rd, and on November the 7th or 8th, I might be doing a basketball game somewhere on an aircraft carrier or Indianapolis or something like that. So they are very different. Baseball, I love both, but the rhythm and pace of the two is extremely different. Baseball, obviously, you have more time to fill, not as much with the pitch clock, and that's a good thing, but you have more time to fill. So you kind of need more research on a baseball game. You need more stories, and you don't try to jam them all in, but you should have them just in case you need them. Basketball, especially a college basketball game, because it's a 40-minute game as opposed to NBA, which is 48, like you blink and it's halftime and you don't get anything in. You're just trying to keep up. So, at the heart of it, they're the same. Who's playing? What are their stats? What are their characteristics? What is their importance to the team? What is their role in this game? That's the basics, right? Those are the building blocks of doing any broadcast. You got to be prepared. But if I tried to call a baseball game at my basketball pace,
No.
everybody would turn off their TV because they would say, like, dude, stop talking, let up already. And you can't call a basketball game at a baseball pace because people would be saying, tell me something. I don't know what's happening right now. So they're very, very, very different, but I love them both very much.
This is just a bit of a side. Do you ever get almost like you just finished baseball and then you go into a basketball and you're almost in that cadence and you have to like wake up and be like, okay, I need to go to a basketball? Or is it quite easy for you to kind of transition into
I mean, I'm used to it now.
Yeah.
I'm old, so I've been doing this almost 30 years. So I've had 29 seasons, excuse me, of transitioning from baseball to basketball and then basketball to baseball. But in all honesty, that first basketball game and then that first baseball game, whether it's spring training or regular season, I always go in a little bit nervous, and it is like riding a bike. Like at halftime of the first game, I'm like, okay, I remember how to do this, but it is different. But this is very common for play-by-play announcers. There are very few I shouldn't say there aren't that many play-by-play announcers who only do one sport. A lot of us do multiple sports, so it does take some getting used to. But after all these years, I kind of hope I've got it figured out by now.
And for you kind of alluded to just the pace in which you go in terms of kind of doing a baseball game versus a basketball game. But what else are some of the keys in your minds to being a good play-by-play announcer? And maybe what advice would you give to young play-by-play announcers trying to come up in the industry?
Well, number one is be prepared. Like there's no substitute for hard work. I always say to anybody, if you are trying to get into this business to be rich and famous, don't do it. That's not, if you want to get into this business because you love sports and you're willing to work hard and do all kinds of stuff and crazy hours and crazy places that if that's the kind of life you want, do it. But there are no guarantees. As you may know, my son is starting out right now, and he and I have had many, many, many conversations. And I played the what if game with him. What if you only get here? What if this is the sport they offer you? That kind of stuff. And he said, I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. And so those are the right answers. So, but you got to be prepared to do all kinds of stuff that maybe isn't quite what you dreamt of doing when you got into the business. So one, be flexible, adaptable, be prepared. Number two, I would say, is understand it's not all about you. And by you, I mean the play-by-play announcer. It's a team game. There's an analyst, there's a reporter, there are camera people, there's a producer, a director, an audio person, a statistician, replay people, all of that. They all matter. They're all important. Put it in a hockey term. Would you rather score a hat trick and lose, or would you rather set up 3 goals and win? I'd rather set up 3 goals and win. I'll take the assist over the goal 99% of the time. So, some play-by-play announcers, like every walk of life. Some people have big egos, some people have small egos, whatever. But be a good teammate. Understand that everybody is working as hard as you are. Some of them are working harder than you are to make that show go on the air. So involve everybody, learn their names, understand what everybody does with, as best you can. There are a lot of people putting a broadcast on the air. But make it about the game you're covering, and make it about your team, the broadcast team. Don't just make it about yourself.
I always wonder with play-by-play announcers and color analysts, how for you, Dan, how do you develop those relationships and really the chemistry to be a good duo? Like I'm thinking of you and Jay Bilas, you and Buck Martinez. Maybe are those, how much of that is just your off-air chemistry and friendship, and how much is that just work chemistry, or kind of putting in the hours to kind of become natural and free-flowing between the two of you?
It can be a combination. So, for example, the first game I did with Buck was April of '95, and we barely knew each other, like literally barely knew each other. I had auditioned with him. That audition I told you about, where I didn't get the job, was with Buck.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have met him 2 other times, or might have interviewed him on the Fan a couple of times, or CJCL a couple of times. But he and I remember what he said to me. So again, he'd been doing this for a number of years, and I was 28 years old. And he said to me, if we can make this sound like 2 guys sitting at a bar watching a baseball game, we'll do okay. And obviously, I remember that all these years later. And he and I think, and I think he thinks too, for whatever reason, we just developed this instant chemistry on the air. Now, we spent a lot of time together. We did 80 games a year for 6 years together. And that's a lot of airplanes and a lot of hotels and a lot of dinners on the off day, and a lot of, do you want to grab a beer after the game? That's that kind of thing. But above and beyond all that, I think we just got lucky that we had an on-air chemistry. I bet you it was halfway through our first season together. And we've talked about this. He could read my mind and I could read his. Sometimes something will happen on the field, and we might be looking at the field, or we might be looking at our monitor. And he and I will look at each other, and we don't need to say anything because we're on the air. We can't speak to each other secretly without it going on the air. But we just look at each other, and it's an understanding. Did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Do you want to talk about it, or do it? Like, it's just, we have this like ability to know what each other is thinking. And then we didn't work together from 2001 until 2016. Like for 15 years, we didn't work together at all until I came back, and it kind of picked up where it left off, I think, anyways. So I hope it sounds that way. So sometimes you just have that natural chemistry with somebody like Dick Vitale or Jay Bilas. I don't think I had quite that initial, connection in terms of knowing I was very inexperienced too. Well, Jay and I kind of came up at the same time, but that's just reps. Like Dick Vitale is a unicorn. You got to go through it to get it. That's like they took Danny and they threw him in the deep end. The second game I ever did at ESPN was with Dick Vitale, and I was like, whoa. And again, because it's 1995, I hadn't seen him 100 times on TV. I knew who he was. I'd seen him a little bit, but how many games were on Canadian TV back there? That was a learning experience. That took some getting used to. Because Dick is who he is. That's what makes him wonderful, but it's also a bit of a challenge sometimes, but until you figure it out. And with Jay, it was just reps, doing games. And I know what Dick likes to talk about. I know what Jay likes to talk about. I know what Buck likes to talk about. I know what Joe Siddle likes to talk about. So there are many things that I would throw to Jay that I wouldn't throw to Dick, and many things I would throw to Dick that I wouldn't throw to Jay. So it's, again, I always make tired sports analogies when I'm asked these kinds of questions, but say I'm the shortstop, where does the second baseman like to feed on the double play? Well, I'll ask him, I'll figure it out. Or I'm the center, where does the winger, is he going to go wide of the D or cut into the middle? Like where does he want the pass? It's a little trial and error at the beginning, and then you figure it out.
Before we go to the Jays a little bit, I want to ask a little bit about just what would you say in your long career is maybe your most fondest memory? I know you love calling games at Allen Fieldhouse. Maybe just like what kind of memory sticks out, or memories stick out the most for you?
Well, getting a chance to do the Blue Jays obviously is wonderful. There are 30 teams, so there are roughly 60 play-by-play announcers between TV and radio, maybe a little bit more than that. Some jobs are split. How many of those 60-ish play-by-play announcers are calling games for their hometown teams? I'm just lucky. this is where I grew up. I was at the game on April 7th, 77,
Wow.
that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of in like a special category of it's amazing. Going to Allen Fieldhouse, where Kansas plays, as you said, is phenomenal. Doing Duke Carolina games. I think I've done about 27 or 28 Duke Carolina games the last 13, 14 years, whatever it is. I'm a Canadian statistics and actuarial science major. How did this happen? And obviously I love basketball and I love college basketball, but again, like, this is not what I thought I was going to be doing. This is way beyond what I thought I was going to be doing. So, doing stuff like that. I did the Final Four twice for the international feed. It's always CBS or TBS that has it, and I'm an ESPN guy. But back in like 2014 and 15, I think it was, I did the international feed. So I got a chance to call a couple of Final Fours, and nobody in the US saw it, but people in Canada and around the world saw it, other English-speaking countries. For baseball, I've done 4 no-hitters, including the one the Blue Jays just got dealt, the team no-hitter by the Tigers. So that's kind of fun. And then many of my fondest memories are ESPN radio in October, because the network that I did baseball for many, many years, ESPN, didn't have the playoffs other than a wild card game sometimes. But ESPN radio had and has the playoffs in its entirety. So I was lucky to do a million baseball playoff games, the World Series for the last 12 years. Nobody in Canada heard it, but I did the Joey Bautista, Joey Bats, the Jose Bautista bat flip game for ESPN radio.
Wow.
Called the Cubs winning a World Series. How many people can do that? Can say they've done that? My first one was St. Louis and Texas, and Game 6 of that series is probably the craziest baseball game that's been played. So that was very fun. So those are big memories. If I could add one thing to it to cap it off, now that I'm back full-time doing baseball with Sportsnet, and we have the rights to do playoff games, which is very exciting. No other team can do that. Everybody else steps aside for Fox or TBS or whoever it is. But because we're in Canada, it's now been decided that it's okay. We're not infringing on anybody's contracts or ratings or anything. If I were ever able to call a Blue Jay World Series for millions of people across this country, that would be a nice cherry on top of the sundae.
I think you gave me a great transition, because I want to ask you about the Blue Jays, and obviously I think their goal going into the year would be to make the World Series. They've had maybe an up and down season. What have you thought, being at every game, what have you thought of their season so far, 50-41 at the All-Star break, and maybe what do you expect going into the end of the season after the All-Star break? Can they make the playoffs? Where do you kind of see this team so far?
It's funny because they're 50-41 in easily the toughest division of baseball, maybe the toughest division in the history of baseball.
Yep.
And yet it feels like they've underperformed a little bit. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. Judging by Twitter, a lot of people think they've underperformed by a lot. And I think what people forget, and we've tried to tell the story, we had a graphic a couple of nights ago. Nobody in the American League had a record better than 24-20 over the last 44 games or something like that. Like, Yankee fans are screaming, Astro fans are screaming, Angels fans are screaming, everybody's screaming right now. And it's just been one of those years where a lot of teams aren't quite playing as well as they had hoped. Even, Tampa Bay at the All-Star break had lost 6 of its last 7, and Baltimore's right on their heels right now. So, but I do think they have underperformed a little bit. And Alek Manoah obviously didn't have the first half that he would like. An encouraging final start or an encouraging return for him, the Friday night game in Detroit. Hopefully, if he can just keep them in games in the second half, that's a big help. Give him a chance to win half of his starts. And then offensively, it's been discussed. A few guys haven't done as well as you would like. And also there's kind of been a general, not quite team-wide, but a lot of guys on the team just haven't hit as well with runners in scoring position. So you look at some of the raw numbers, the slugging and the OPS and all that, it doesn't add up to as many runs as we thought it would add up to. So can they make the playoffs? Sure. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but as you and I speak on the Monday of the All-Star break, they're in the second wild card spot in the American League. They could easily make the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs, they've got as good a shot as anybody, I think, because they've got good starting pitching. a good bullpen. But I think for this team to reach its ultimate goals, win a couple of rounds, make a World Series, maybe even win a World Series, they need collectively to pick up their game. I don't think this is a blockbuster trade kind of season
Okay.
for the Blue Jays. Yeah, I think this is, maybe they go out and get a right-handed bat or something with some thump to come off the bench and pinch hit. But I think it's about, 5, 6, 7 guys just doing a little bit more than they did in the first half, and hopefully that's enough.
And with that, obviously, you mentioned Blue Jays Twitter. They definitely Vladdy has been discussed on and on in Blue Jays Twitter. And I know you talked about how he's actually been pretty good the past, this year, but also the past couple of weeks, and hitting better with runners in scoring position. Maybe just tell us what you think of kind of seeing Vladdy day in and day out. Maybe what should Blue Jays fans kind of expect from him going into the end of the season, and maybe why you think he's maybe slumping a little bit for, such a high standard that he's had when in 2021, where he probably wins MVP if it isn't for Shohei Ohtani.
Right. So 2021, there's no doubt he benefited a little bit from Buffalo and Dunedin. Now, he still had an incredible year. It's not like if you take away Buffalo, Dunedin, he's having a bad year. He's still having an incredible year, but it did boost the numbers a little bit. I thought in April of this year, he was great. I thought his process was great. His ability to lay off pitches was great. He just tried to hit the ball as hard as he could, wherever it was pitched. And then at some point, I think that maybe the fact that the home runs weren't coming quite as much as he wanted them to, I think he changed. I think he chased a little bit more. I think he tried to lift the ball a little bit more. I think he tried to pull the ball a little bit more. I don't know that that works for him. He's so gifted that his floor is higher than most guys' ceiling, even at the major league level. What's his floor? 800 OPS? That's 70 points above major league average. It's crazy. Yeah. We haven't since April, 3 days here, 4 days there, where you say, oh, here it is, here he goes. But then it kind of, he's had his peaks and valleys. I don't know what to expect. I really don't. I do think there's more in there. But I think for him to reach his peak, he's got to stay with his process and just hit the hardest line drive he can hit and see what happens. I don't think it should be about home runs for Vladdy. As you said, though, he has been actually really good with runners in scoring position. He and Bichette have easily been the two best. There are other guys whose numbers are very, very low in those situations, but Vladdy's not one of them. So when he has, I know it feels like he hits a million ground balls and do more. But he's actually done a really good job with runners in scoring position. I don't know exactly how many RBIs he has, 57 or 58 or something. Like, if you're hitting 275 with 13 homers at the All-Star break and you've driven in 58 runs or whatever it is, you're obviously doing a pretty good job. Like, he could drive in 100 runs this year. But he is a victim of his own talent in that people will always want more unless he puts up that kind of a year that he had 2 years ago. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. Like, we're already like 60% of the way through the season, almost. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll come next year. Maybe he'll wind up just being a very good player instead of a, Hall of Famer or historically great player. I don't know. I wonder, like everybody else does, because you see it in glimpses, and the glimpses are so exciting. You just want to see it all the time.
And with that, obviously, his kind of partner in crime in hitting, Bo Bichette has been amazing this year. The Jays' best hitter. He's lower swing rate. What do you think just has made him so effective this year compared to past years where you're still really good, but this year he's just been outstanding?
I think he's kind of an outlier. Like, if you had a 10-year-old kid who was really good at baseball, I don't think you'd teach him to hit like Bo Bichette. I don't think you could do that. I don't think many people can hit like Bo Bichette except for Bo Bichette. I think Bo decided kind of midway through last year, I know who I am. I know what works for me. I think before that, he was trying to do what everybody else was telling him to do. Well, you swing too much. Take this pitch. Take that pitch. It's 0-2 too much. Take this pitch. Take that pitch. And I think Bo was kind of caught in between doing what he wanted to do to please the coaches or whomever it was and doing what felt right to him. And I think at some point last year in August, he just said, I'm going to do what works for me. And then September, he was a monster. Like, I don't know if you remember his September. It was insane. And I think Bo is a guy who stays with his process. Like, people may not agree with his process, but he stays with it. You don't ever see Bo. with rare exceptions this year, you don't see Bo say, do something, and then you go, boy, that's different, or that's not like Bo. Like, Bo's Bo. Everybody knows who Bo Bichette is. He knows what he wants to do at the plate. He is mentally disciplined to the nth degree, and he's been doing what he thinks works for him. And judging by the fact that he's an all-star and leading the American League in hitting and putting up all kinds of good numbers, I think he knows what he's doing.
And with that, obviously the Jays bullpen has been much maligned for the past couple of years. I think they're 5th in ERA this year. The team pitching is about 9th, I think, in ERA. Just what do you make of, it seems as though this team's pitching at the best level it's had in the past couple of years under Vladdy and Bichette kind of era, and what do you think's kind of changed? Because they haven't changed dramatically, the team, other than a couple players, and especially in the bullpen where they brought in Swanson, but not huge additions.
Yeah. Well, Swanson is a very nice addition. Tim Hayes is quietly having a great year. Nate Pearson's a big leaguer now. Maybe he's not the frontline starter everybody wanted him to be, or the closer everybody wanted him to be, but he's a viable reliever now. I think that he has helped. The biggest thing to me, though, is that Kikuchi and especially Berríos are better than they were last year. I think Kikuchi's always going to have his ups and downs. Some days he'll be great. Some days he'll have trouble throwing strikes. Some days he'll get a lot of swing and miss, and some days he'll give up some rockets. But he's better than last year. I think we can all agree on that. Yeah. Just keeping them in game. And Berríos is noticeably better than last year. He looks very much like the Jose Berríos that he was for 6 years before last year. And I think those are the two big differences. Last year they had 2 spots in the rotation. They just didn't know what they were going to get every 5 days. So the pitching is good. There's always room for improvement. Hopefully Hyunjin Ryu can come back and help. Hopefully Chad Green can come back and help. Those would be 2 nice additions. It's a cliche, but it's almost like those are your trade deadline acquisitions if those guys show up the 1st of August. And that gives them depth in case somebody is struggling or somebody gets hurt. So it's, I think the starting rotation, especially if Manoah is just okay, the starting rotation is very good. The bullpen is good. There's still sometimes where you'd like to see come, and this is where Pearson can be so important. When Nate Pearson's really on and he comes out firing 100 and getting swings and misses in the 7th or 8th inning of a close game, that's cool. And Eric Swanson's had a great year. He just had to work a ton in the first half. So the bullpen is better. I don't know that it's an elite bullpen, but if you go back and look at some of the names who pitched for this team last year, and even more so in 2021, the bullpen is better now. It's good enough to get them to the playoffs. In the playoffs, yeah, who knows? Small sample, short series, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I want to ask you before I go to the senior men's national team, just a bit about what have you thought of the tenure of Atkins and Shapiro? Obviously, they've been here for 6-7 years now. And, the team hasn't won a playoff game, right? And I mean, I think by now most fans would have at least expected that. So what do you make of their tenure, and maybe how long of a leash do you think they have from the team just going forward if the Jays continue to lose early in the playoffs?
Right. Well, I think the 2016 postseason goes on their ledger. So,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I believe had taken over.
Yeah, you're right.
So, I felt they were unfairly maligned at the beginning by the fan base because you had a bunch of older guys making a lot of money, and they had there wasn't a future for that nucleus. These guys were 35, 36, 37. They had to tear it down. And it was painful, and they took a lot of grief for it. And I thought some of it was unfair. Since then, I think they've had some, to borrow baseball terms, some swings and some misses. Some stuff's worked out great. Kevin Gausman's worked out great. They could have re-signed Robbie Ray, right? And he's missing all of this year with Tommy John. But Tanner Roark didn't work out so well. I think it's been hot and cold, and I think they're trying, and ownership is spending more than they ever have, which is good. But and I think a lot of fans would agree with me, the last 2 years, 21 and 22, it does feel like they should have won they should have won more games than they did. I think of this era, the last 3-4 years, the 2021 team was the best team they had.
Okay.
But the bullpen really, really hurt them that year. And it wasn't so much that it hurt them late, but it cost them so many games early that didn't make the playoffs. They got to the last day and didn't make the playoffs. But I think had they made the playoffs in 21, who knows what they might have been able to do. So I think this past off season, they made a more obvious, conscious effort to shore up some of the things that were clearly a problem. Bullpen, swing and miss, defense, and lineup balance. Varsho, Kiermaier, Belt, the lefties coming in, Varsho and Kiermaier improving the defense of the base running, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, it's worked out, but it hasn't worked out perfectly. Varsho's a better hitter than he's shown. He's still doing an incredible job defensively and on the bases. They need him to hit a little bit more. Kiermaier's been great. Belt, after the very cold start, he's been Brandon Belt. He's been exactly what you think you're going to get when you get Brandon Belt. So the lineup has more balance. I don't think it has perfect balance, but it has more balance. The defense is, unquestionably a lot better. So I think they went out and shored up some of their weaknesses. I think the reason they're not winning more, again, is some of the guys they've had aren't having the same kind of year. Vladdy's not having the same kind of year. Springer didn't at the beginning. He is the last 6-7 weeks or so, but he didn't at the beginning. Kirk is not having the same kind of year. There are a couple of others as well, but those are some of the names that come to mind right away. So I'm not into giving letter grades or anything like that, but for this front office, I would say some stuff has worked out, some stuff hasn't. I don't think they get credit for the stuff that has worked out maybe as much as they should, because I think some people were just early on predisposed to being opposed to them or disliking the moves or whatever. But they're trying. They've signed Ryu, Springer, Gosman, Barrios. They've gone out there and I mean, they traded for Barrios, but then they signed him to the extension, and then Bassett, and they've done stuff at the trade deadline. They are trying. But I think if the farm system had been able to produce a little bit more the last couple of years, it kind of feels like there's a gap now, right? Yeah. After the Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio into Manoah, Kirk, since then there's been a gap of a year or two, and it doesn't appear like there's a ton at AAA. That's an issue too. You always want that next wave coming. So that can turn around. Maybe some of the guys who aren't having great years will figure it out. But I think the easiest thing for me to say is some swings and some misses so far.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hopefully they make a big push at the end of the year and maybe make the playoffs, and maybe you're covering the World Series in Toronto. And I mean,
hope so.
I
should say some hits and some misses. I guess a swing is not what that was not the phrase.
Exactly.
But you know what I mean. Yeah.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask you about the senior men's national team. I also heard that you have an out clause in your contract to go to the Olympics. I don't know if that's true, if they qualify, which I think is just the coolest thing. But maybe just tell us a little bit about maybe your affinity for the senior men's national team and how you feel about them going into the World Cup this summer with a new coach, Jordi Fernandez, and obviously Nick Nurse is gone. And I think we'll find out this week kind of who's going to be playing. So maybe just tell us a bit about what you think about this team and hopefully you being in Paris in 2024.
Yeah. So I love Canada and I love basketball. So I've always loved Canada basketball. And what you're referring to is all those years when I did baseball for ESPN, I had a clause in my contract that said if the Canadian men qualified for the Olympics, I could miss a couple of weeks of ESPN baseball to do the Olympics. Yes. As you know, they never did that. So I did do the Olympics 2 years ago when they were in Tokyo. I was in Toronto, but I did. Sorry, that's my dog barking. She wants in. She wants in. But I did the men's and the women's basketball for CBC 2 years ago when they were in Tokyo. We did it remotely. Still, the height of COVID kind of, so we did it remotely from the CBC studios here in Toronto. I did the Victoria qualifier. I did the ill-fated one when they lost to Venezuela a few years ago in the last chance tournament, the controversial one. So, I think I've actually done a little bit more Canada basketball stuff maybe than people realize. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. It's not my place to announce my involvement in future events, so I'll wait for the people who like to make the announcements make the announcement. But I'm excited and I'm bullish on the senior men's team too. I know they've had the coaching change, as you said, from Nick Nurse to Jordi Fernandez. Nick Nurse, a fantastic coach. Jordy Fernandez, very highly thought of, connections to Jamal Murray, which never hurts. So, and to me, it all starts with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, he's kind of become the face of the program, and
Yeah.
he's in. And again, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I think we're going to know who's at training camp pretty soon. And when you get Shai, you get an all-star caliber player. You get his cousin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's really good. You know, there's just so much depth now. It used to be, is Corey Joseph playing? Is Tristan Thompson playing? And those were the only two guys. Now you've got Luguentz Dort, you've got Corey Joseph if you want to, but you've got so many guards, an incredible number of guards, that some very, very good players, some NBA players are not going to be on this team because there's just not that much room for them. Obviously, RJ Barrett will be there. As you and I speak, I don't know about Andrew Wiggins or Dylan Brooks.
Yeah.
I think Dwight Powell is there. I know Kelly Olynyk is going to be there. They need a little more size. I think Zach Edey will be on the team as like the third big if they're playing anybody at the World Cup who's got a 7'3" guy or something like that. I'm excited. I'm bullish. And it would really, really, really be nice if they found a way to qualify for the Olympics out of the World Cup. Like, you want to do as well as you can at the World Cup because that's a huge event, obviously. But just as big, if not bigger, is can you qualify for the Olympics? They don't want to go to a last chance tournament in June of next year like they've had to do the last couple of times. That's asking for trouble. You got 6 countries, you got to win it. You know, look what happened last time. I mean, it looked like they were set up to win it.
Yeah.
And the Czechs beat them, right? Yeah, the Czechs beat them.
The game winner by Sadaransky, and
yeah, that's right. After they'd made this big comeback, Canada made this big comeback, and then he hit the shot. So it won't be easy, as always seems to be the case. They've got a tough draw. They're in one of the 2 groups of death, to borrow a FIFA term, but you know, at some point you just got to say, go win. Like, you've got the talent, no excuses, go win. And for them to qualify, for people who don't know, I'm sure you know, they've got to be one of the top 2 America's teams in terms of the final placement. There are 32 countries there, and I think there are 7 America's teams. So they've got to be one of the best 2. The USA is very good. It's a younger USA team, but it kind of feels like the nucleus of this team is the Olympic team, maybe not next year, but 4 years later. Like, they've got some great young players. You don't want to concede anything to the US, but if they are going to be great, Canada's got to do better than Argentina, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and then I'm sorry, Argentina's not there. I forgot.
Yeah, Argentina
got to do better than Brazil, Dominican, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Mexico.
Yeah.
So they're in a group with France, Latvia, and Lebanon. France apparently will not have Wembanyama and will not have Embiid. Got to go beat France. Got to come out 3-0, so you have a good record heading into the second round. It all carries over. So I'm excited. It is something I have enjoyed from afar. I've been able to call a little bit, and I'm excited about where things might go in the next couple of years.
What do you think it would mean for basketball in this country if the men's team finally made the Olympics and did well and maybe medaled, because they have that kind of talent, especially with the women being so successful for so many years and coming forth at the FIBA World Championships last year? And just what do you think it'd mean for basketball in this country?
Well, I think it would be awesome to see both the men and the women playing, say, in a semifinal game at the Olympics. So knowing that even if you lose, then you're still playing for a medal and you've got a chance to be on the podium. And the women are closer right now because they have a history of placing higher than the men. But specifically to answer your question about the men, and I've told this to people in the industry and out, if the men make the Olympics, I think the television ratings are going to be ridiculous, off the charts. I think a lot of people, and I know, because I know friends of mine who love the Raptors and love basketball, and they're like, World Cup? When is that? Yeah. Where is that? What does that mean? There's still a lot of that. But if they qualify for the Olympics, everybody will know who's on the team, and everybody will have 10 months or whatever it is to get excited about it. I think a lot of people are still conditioned to, well, the best guys don't play. And hopefully this is the opportunity to break through that. If they do make the Olympics and start doing well, I think basketball is going to be right up there with track and swimming and gymnastics as the biggest events at the Olympics. I think people from coast to coast to coast are going to tune in droves to watch them play, because like imagine if if the semifinals were the U.S. I'm just making it up, the U.S., France, Spain, and Canada. How cool is that? And
For USA
it's
Canada, like
right.
semifinal or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. It's not a given. It may not even be a likelihood, but it's possible. But it all starts in the Philippines and Indonesia, I guess more specifically, in a couple of months. So, but I think it would be a huge deal. But if they can qualify out of the World Cup, then they've got 10 months of momentum. And then there's no, well, is this guy going to play next year? Will he go to a last chance tournament in June? And what if his team does well in the playoffs in the NBA? But, they just got to find a way to qualify in the World Cup. And then I think they're rolling after that.
Well, Dan, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Really cool for me for you to come on the show. And I just want to give you the floor. Is there anything fans should expect from you on Jay's broadcast or anything else the rest of the year that people should stay tuned for?
Yeah, no, just me being me. I'm blessed to have this job, and I just like people knowing I'm Canadian, and I was at Jay's games as a kid, and I'm invested in not only the franchise but the fan base, and I love knowing that people in Newfoundland are watching and people in Victoria are watching. The Jays are going to Seattle in a couple of weeks. That's one of my favorite things every year, to see 30,000 Jays fans down there. And believe me, I cannot go out to get a coffee or a bagel without bumping into hundreds of them. They are everywhere in Seattle. It's a complete takeover. And I just want to give a shout out to the fans. The Blue Jays have unbelievable fans. And we at Sportsnet all feel it. We are, we are very aware of how much this team means to people across the country. And hopefully that shows in what we put into the broadcast.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. I really appreciate it. And I hope they go deep in the playoffs, and it'll be a fun ride. And also with Canada basketball, hopefully they qualify for the World Cup next month. So thanks so much again for doing this. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your summer.
All right, Alex, thanks very much.